Welcome, Poppy, to the In the Know podcast. I'm so pleased you've joined me today. And I know we're going to be talking about data, client experience. We're also going to be talking about AI as well. And I think the reason I'm very pleased to see you, and I always get pleased, I'm always pleased to see my guests, is the last few weeks in my business has been just so busy with regards to the transformation that we're going through with regards to AI and data and client experience. So hopefully I'm going to get some practical sort of tips as well from you. But also I think the conversations that I have with clients when they're talking about AI, they tend to focus on that bit. But I think we both agree that there's a fundamental pillar with regards to data that needs to be discussed and fleshed out so people really understand the power of data moving forward in their business. So I'm so looking forward to this. I need this conversation. The last 2 weeks have been really, really tough. So hopefully I'm on the right path. But before we get into that, Poppy, let me find out a bit more about you then. How did you end up in financial services? What's your journey into where you are today?
James, firstly, good morning and thank you very much for inviting me. We're looking forward to the conversation. In terms of how did I get into financial services, I think it's like how most people got in, by accident. Rather than by design. So graduated, ended up joining a graduate scheme with an advice business. Joined as a paraplanner. So kind of got my feet wet in terms of what advice is. So working with the IFAs. That business grew exponentially. I think at its height, we had over 2,000 advisors. So it kind of grew incredibly. And what you learned in that business was, A, how do you deal with clients? How do you deliver advice? But also how a distribution business works, and also what not to do, as well as what to do, because that business unfortunately collapsed just after I left. But after moving into the advice space, I then went over and started working for a research company, very much focused on the technology space. But we're talking about 25 years ago. This is when technology was embryonic. IO had just been born. It was part of the organisation that I worked for. We were the first client. So we were the first IO users. And that was
Intelligent Office?
That is Intelligent Office. I apologise, yes. Yeah. They MBO'd out of that business. And the rest, as they say, is history. And they've become an uber successful business, now branching out overseas across the US and Australia. But as I entered that space of consulting in technology, it was really interesting because that's when the back offices were forming, the client portals were forming, the research engines, and the industry was trying to get together and thinking out, all this technology forming, we need to develop some kind of messaging standards and protocols that allows insurers and platforms to start talking to these systems. So it was absolutely fascinating just being there at the kind of almost the birth of all of this technology. So spent several years in that space understanding fintech, distribution, advice businesses, and all that good stuff. And then I thought, well, I've got to get out of the blue sky and get my hands dirty again. So I went contracting and ended up with some fabulous organisations. So L&G, where I spent 2 years on their RDR programme, which was amazing. What a fantastic business that was. Moving into working with the Pru on their system selection. And then being the curious soul that I am, because I am always thinking, well, what is that? How does that bit of the industry work? Or how does that bit work? I ended up, very luckily, joining Vanguard. So Vanguard are an amazing business. I mean, what they've achieved in the US, globally, and in the UK is phenomenal. So I spent many years there delivering change for them. MiFID was the big beast that we had to tackle when we were at Vanguard, and I was a lead on that particular program. And after Vanguard, I joined M&G, another amazing business, working on transformation change for them as part of their front and middle office. So kind of understanding how asset management works. It's just a beast. These are big organisations, so trying to deliver change into those, you really have to learn how to navigate the business, the people, and the personalities. So those are the key things there.
I can imagine that being quite stressful with different stakeholders, different priorities, different personality, everything. It must be quite difficult.
I always find with change, a project plan is a project plan. It is very black and white. You know what you've got to do. You know who needs to do it, and you know how long it's going to take pretty much, and when it has to be done by. And if it's a regulatory project, there is just a date. It is that date, and everybody's working to it. The big challenge always is people. It's getting people to understand, to buy in, to do the work, and then to take ownership once we have to walk away and we have to hand over. So honing your people skills and learning how to deal with different personalities, that was fundamental. But actually, it's been an absolute education. In fact, my entire 25-year career has always been about learning. I'm a curious soul. And as somebody in the organisation I'm with now said yesterday, every day's a school day. It is, because we're always learning.
Never stop learning.
You never stop learning. And the moment you do, I think, you do yourself a disservice, you do your team a disservice, your organisation. But I'm a curious beast, so I never stop learning.
What would you say was your biggest challenge then in your career to date?
My biggest challenge, I think, is the challenge I've embarked on now. Because historically, I've always gone and worked for an organisation within a structure. So you have that safety of saying, well, actually, someone's done all the hard work of setting up the business. People over there are selling product, you're manufacturing product, and I've got a role here, and I've got a very specific role to play, and that's the bat I'm gonna take on. In this particular role that I'm doing now, I set myself the challenge of setting up a proposition based upon my 2.5 decades of experience, thinking there is an issue bubbling up across advice and wealth management firms. There are pockets of solutions, and there are some people offering to help in this space. But I didn't think there was something out there that was scalable, that could support the kinds of businesses that really need a helping hand to get them from where they are now, their current state, to their future state, which we fundamentally believe is going to be businesses that are data-led, client experience focused, and AI enabled. Those are the 3 tenets that we're working to.
So those are the 3 pillars. Okay. It's a lovely segue. Let's talk about data. Okay.
Let's talk about data.
And because we had a conversation a few weeks ago, didn't we? And honestly, when I was driving in this morning, I was thinking about how do you open this podcast? You know, what would I be saying? And the conversation that I had, I didn't think I would have a few years ago and be excited about data. Because as a business owner, I tend to be more creative and entrepreneurial. And I know data is important, but I didn't realise how important it is and how fundamental it is in everything that we do. So I'm very much now tuned in. But it's amazing that a couple of years ago, when my ops manager used to talk about data, it was like, oh, God, Ed, no, please. You know, I want to be thinking about the US or over here and doing this. But we talk about data a lot, okay? But data with regards to financial planning or wealth management, what does it actually mean, the word data? So because we're talking about it a lot, don't we? So what is it? But when you refer to data, what is it? What does it actually mean in a business, which is an advisory business, for example?
Okay, so people will often say that data is the new oil. Okay, so if I use that as an analogy, so what do we use oil for? Oil is in plastics. We use it to fuel our cars. We use it to fuel our planes. We use it to fuel gas fires, etc. Is literally the lifeblood of society. So if oil stopped being produced as a global society, we would probably stop functioning pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Would be goosed, right? To use your phrase. So if I look at data within a business such as yours, and there is an analogy between your business and a typical advice and wealth management businesses, because the data is data. It doesn't really differ between a financial services business, a retail business, a telecoms business, or government bodies, etc. It is essentially the information you are inputting into the systems that you are using, and that data is then being collected, and it has purpose. That data will drive output, it will drive activity, it will drive workflow. Just as you put fuel into a car, it gets you from A to B. Your data, whatever you enter in the front, will be spat out at the end, and it will power, whether it's a client output report, it will power a workflow, it will power your regulatory reporting, it'll power your business intelligence.
So it's basically everything.
It is literally the lifeblood of an organisation now. And it's interesting that you said that a couple of years ago when your ops manager was saying, James, we've got to talk about data. And you were like, oh gosh, do we? I'd rather be focused on that over there. What I'm seeing right now is there are some senior leaders out there that truly get it, that realise that what they're sat on is a data business that delivers advice to their clients. They get it. They see the mountain of data that they've accumulated and think, right, we now have got to harness this, we've got to gather it, we've got to make use of it, and we've got to use it to power our decision making. I would call those organisations being in the vanguard, and there I've come across many of them. Then we have organisations in the middle that are very much like you were saying, oh, what is this data stuff? People keep telling me that we've got an issue, we've got to focus on it.
Yeah.
It's a problem in my head, but it's not a strategic objective. And then we've got that third cohort who I think either don't think about it at all or just think it's somebody else's problem. Okay, so it's just not something I'm going to think about. And there may be a really good reason for that. So that's where I think we are today. We are absolutely focused through the business that we've just now set up, the proposition. It's called Accelerator Labs. Our entire mission right now is to work with businesses who are thinking, I want to be a data-led business, but I need strategic support and expertise to get me there. Because to be data-led as an objective is fantastic, but it does require a level of expertise to get you from A to B. And I would suggest right now that there are many advice and wealth management businesses out there who are trying to get onto that path and doing it with internal expertise and talent, but would benefit from external support. It is a minefield. It is a huge topic. And people have devoted their careers to becoming data experts. So why not call those individuals in as and when you think you need them? Not everybody needs them, but I would hypothesize that most probably do at some point in their journey.
Do you think there's a skills gap at the moment then?
This is a big one for me, and I'll be super passionate about this one. There's a huge skills gap. I was at a technology conference earlier in the year, and on that stage there were at least 3 keynote presenters, one being the CEO of the business, that said the biggest issue facing advice and wealth management businesses is a skills gap. And the skills gap really is around data. If I have, let me just throw some numbers out here. I was trying to do the maths, and I'm not a mathematician.
Well, neither am I.
Okay, so if you have 100, most people say it's 100 to 150 clients per advisor.
Yeah,
let's just
that's reasonable.
Let's just use 100.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. I've got 100 advisors. I then have 100 clients per advisor, and I then have per client about 200 data items. I've got a fact find, I've got cash flow planning, I've got a risk profiler, I've got other tools where I've collected information about my client. You certainly start to see how the volume of data stacks up. I've now got 250 advisors, 1,000 advisors. So you're now sat on a stack of data. Who is in your business responsible for managing that? Whose job is it to say, all of this data that we're collecting about James, about Poppy, about all the thousands of clients that we've got, it's accurate, it's timely, it's reliable? Who is doing that? That's the question I have for businesses. And quite often, James, it will sit in IT or it will sit in ops. But actually, the role of governing data is a job in its own right. And data-led businesses will often have a head of data within their organisations. In fact, I've even seen over the past 12 months, there have been a number of wealth businesses, consolidators even, who've created a role head of data. And I think that's going to absolutely take off. You'll see more and more of those. And in your business, I'd be super surprised if you weren't getting calls saying, James, we need to recruit for a head of data across our business.
We're starting to see it, but it's quite slow. It's quite slow. But I think the market needs to catch up with the skills gap, because this is fundamental to any business. But when you talk about data, what's the issue at the moment? Because is my understanding right that the data isn't always housed under one single source of truth, that it's in different locations? And how easy is it to get data to power the oil of everything if it is here, there and everywhere?
So just before we come on to that, I'm just going to quickly finish off your question about the skills gap. If listeners are interested, I would absolutely point people to something called the Financial Services Skills Commission. They have done a phenomenal job of setting out the skills that people in FS are going to need in the coming years. And there are two attributes to that. There's the behavioural skills, so the soft side, empathy, listening, and then there are the technical skills, data, AI, analytics. Take a look at it. And if I were a senior leader within one of those businesses, I'd be saying, I've got to build a people plan around this. So that's definitely something for firms to look at. Going back to the question of data, I'm going to use the word data fragmentation.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's what we call it internally. The challenge that almost every advice and wealth management business has today is they will be running between 5 to 12 different systems. Now,
wow.
So when the back office was born, when the back office, the CRM was invented, I remember sitting in those industry meetings, which I used to chair, and every COO, every CTO, every CEO would say the same thing. The back office is where we are going to get the single source of truth. We want all of the data in that one system, and that will power everything. That was 20 years ago. Unfortunately, a lot of those leaders have now actually retired, but the next generation coming up have got a problem. That truth never materialized. So I'm running now, let's do the rundown. I'm running a back office system. If I'm lucky, I've got one in my business, and many of your listeners could be running two or multiple, depending upon the nature of the organization that they run. They'll have a risk profiler, they'll have a cash flow modelling tool, they'll have a client portal. They may have something that does their suitability generation reports. They could be running one or multiple platforms. That's 8 already. And that's just for the financial planning piece. I've got quotation portals for protection. I've got mortgage brokering platforms. I've then got potentially fund research tools. I'm up to 12, 13. So...
But when you say it like that, I thought technology was there to help us. It seems like it's confused matters, because if you've already got 12 different points of entry and all of that holds data for your clients, that must be a nightmare for advisory practices just to navigate just around that.
Well, I'm going to refer to the Langcat and Origo report, A Disconnected World, and it's a fantastic piece of research. You can just go online and download it.
I love this, Poppy. You come with receipts. You come with receipts on this. This is good.
I would never take say something was my research when it wasn't. I would never take credit for it. But in their research, they show that it can take up to 3 hours to place a single piece of business, because paraplanners, administrators or advisors are having to go into several systems to take data from here, plug it into here, take something from here, plug it into here. And as a former paraplanner who used to do this, my new business process was probably, half an hour? I'd do an application form, stick it in the post, and it was gone. That was it. So something that would take me half an hour to maybe an hour to do is now taking people 3 hours, because data's going to be plugged in here, 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 and everywhere.
Wow.
The suitability or the report generation process, whether it's a client servicing report or a suitability, the Langcat report suggests that can take up to 7 hours. That hasn't changed from when I was paraplanning.
No.
So let's think,
wow.
In 25 years, the time it takes to produce a suitability report or a client report has not changed. How many of those reports you can produce probably has, maybe because technology has advanced some of it. But I find it bewildering how we seem to be an industry where we have generated so much technology. And if you have a look at some of the fantastic research companies out there that operate in this space, and they keep market maps of how much technology is out there, there's something like 120 different technology vendors that support the financial planning process. The challenge isn't the technology itself always, it's the fact that it doesn't connect. So when I started in the industry, we were developing messaging standards for commissions and valuations. Those are the two big problem areas for all advice businesses, right? We had a business where every Friday Aviva would send a truck full of commission statements, and it was full of boxes, James, that had to be offloaded. We had an entire floor dedicated to humans, and it was typically students at that point. And you'd have a stack of paper and you had a ruler and you had to go line by line by line allocating £1, £10, 50p, 20p to an advisor. The e-commissions messaging standard, which the industry rallied around, resolved all of that. So it can be done. Valuations, you can press a button now and you can pretty much value most of your book. There's always going to be a gap, but you can value most of your book. When it comes to new business applications, the industry has just decided we don't really want to go there. I don't know why. The standards exist, criterion standards exist. The APIs are there now so people can move data around. People say they do it, but to what extent it really works is highly questionable. So I don't know why. I don't have an answer for that. I'd love to know.
Well, it would be nice to know, wouldn't it? Because it's so inefficient. And it's going to create an issue moving down.
So let's pose a problem for the industry. Right now, where you have human capital, so you have advisors who employ administrators. So I'm your advisor, James. We have a human-to-human relationship. Also, don't worry about that. You're paying us to do your paperwork for you. So we'll go off and do your applications and we'll do all the submission. So we'll go from system A to system B to system C to system D, and we'll get that new business put through the pipe. In a world where advisor numbers are dropping, I think, what is it now? There's about 30,000 advisors. I think in the industry, that number stayed pretty static. The number of new advisors coming into the industry has actually fallen. I read a piece a couple of weeks ago. So we're not getting fresh talent through the pipeline. So as human capital declines, surely consumers, customers like you and I, are going to be asked to go on and complete digital tools ourselves, saying, well, actually, we're going to digitize the process. Let me ask you, would you go into 4 different systems to submit an ISA application or to submit a pension application?
Let me answer that. Absolutely no way.
So
I'm time poor.
Well, we're time poor, and also you think, why on earth would you do that?
Not when you can go on Amazon and buy something with 2 clicks. 2 clicks and you're in.
2 clicks and you're in, right? So at some point, the powers that be who have the ability to make things happen, I don't know whether they're waiting for a tipping point, and that tipping point is distribution numbers. The number of advisors who distribute our product are dropping so significantly. Advice businesses are trying to digitize, but if we don't get in there and start allowing them to share data between us and them, we're just not going to be a preferred partner when it comes to product.
Yeah.
Because it's no longer a human doing that back office administration and almost putting a sticky plaster over what's broken. The end customer, i.e. James, you and I, will say, well, we're not going to do that. I'll go somewhere else. Thank you very much. So I think at some point the industry will hopefully pull their finger out and invest in the two-way movement of data that we need. But coming back to the data fragmentation piece, what I'm seeing right now is advice firms have said, I took on a back office system that's got lots of functionality, but I either don't like how it works or it doesn't do what I want it to. And I don't like their cash flow planning tool. I don't like their risk profiling tool. So I'm going to go get a separate one in. Okay, so there's this a phrase that people use, best of breed versus single stack, right? So I'm going to invest my entire business process. I'm going to rally around the technology that I've got, and we're going to make everything fit that technology. Those organisations tend not to suffer so much data fragmentation because actually they're pumping all their data into 1 or 2 systems, and they tend to be okay. And I would submit to you they are probably the smaller organisations who think, well, we don't want to think about it too much, so we're just going to sit on those rails and we'll let those rails take us to where we go. Then there are other organisations, and funnily enough, these tend to be, I don't know whether I just come across more of them, but most of the firms I talk to are saying, well, we're going down the best of breed approach. Our back office is going to perform a core function. It's going to do X. We're then going to plug in a risk profile, a cash flow modelling tool, a client portal, X, Y, and Z. And we're going to try and integrate them and make them work. And when the integration fails, or it's not as good as they want it to be, they put in a load of workarounds, manual workarounds to make that happen. What I'm now seeing firms do, and this is almost in every conversation I'm having, I'd be interested if you have it with your clients, is the phrase data warehousing started to appear a couple of years ago. And by this, what I mean is that principals, leadership teams, executives in large organisations or advice businesses saying, we want to achieve single source of truth, but clearly it's not in the back office, and it can't be if we're now using multiple systems, so data is fragmented. We're going to spin up a data warehouse. We're going to start pushing our data that sits in these multiple bits of technology into the data warehouse. And now we have single source of truth. The technology that I'm now using is essentially a series of workflow tools. This is the language that's being used with me, by the way.
Okay.
From senior execs, CTOs, COOs, etc. So their vision is that the technology is reduced to workflow tools. We elevate data across our business. We spin up a warehouse. And on that warehouse, we can see what data quality looks like across all of the different solutions that we're using. We can now put in a program of work to manage the data. So, James, you're running a practice in my organisation. Your team aren't doing so well with data, so we're going to come in and talk to you and get your guys up to speed. You're not entering postcode. The national insurance numbers are quite often not in there. So we're going to coach you guys through how your practice needs to perform. There's a practice over there doing incredibly well, which means they can go to the next level. So once I've got my data warehoused, I can start to govern it. I can put procedures in place. I can then start to do something else, which is I can start to analyse it. So now you'll see that firms talk about analytics tooling, whether it's Tableau or Power BI. Those are the two that firms are looking at. And that then gives them a view of their business. So how many clients have I got? How many pensions do we have? How many clients do we have living in Colchester, etc.? Once I have the analytics, I can start to improve my board reporting, my leadership reporting, reporting into the practices, to the advisors, to their administrators. And all of a sudden, I can start to see how my business is really performing and functioning. I can now potentially, James, start to identify risk before it materialises and becomes an issue.
Yeah, beforehand.
Or hang on a second, why do we have so many clients of this category with that kind of product? There's a trend there, we don't like it, as opposed to doing risk that is almost backward-looking, forward-looking risk. And then the second thing that they will say is, once we're in that state, we can now do something. We can start to digitise. We have confidence about the data that we've got about our clients, their products, and what they have with us and what they have with platforms or insurers. We can start to launch a client portal. We can start to communicate through marketing, whatever. That's the vision. But the vision right now is hamstrung by the fact that their technology vendors don't talk to each other. So they're saying, well, tell you what, if you're not going to sort it out, we'll bypass you and we'll do something different. And what I find really interesting is every time I have this conversation with a technology vendor, the response is often, well, why on earth are advice businesses doing that? That's crazy.
It is. That is crazy to do that.
And my response is, well, why don't you sit in their shoes for a day or a week? And what would your response be if those were your challenges? And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe I would. So it's a very interesting time, I think, for advice and wealth management businesses. They're starting to really think of their data as an asset. But again, as I said, not everybody. Those that are very much forward thinking. And the conversations that we are having is that being a data-led business doesn't just mean putting your data into a data warehouse, throwing up some analytics and opening a client portal. It actually opens up so many more avenues for you as an organisation. So it's about having a conversation about, well, what does that mean? What does it mean you can do? But also, what do you need to do to execute on all of that? As you said at the beginning, you are going to need a fundamentally different mindset and a skill set within your organisation if you're going to really leverage the data. And we haven't even started talking about AI yet.
And we will do, because obviously everyone else is talking about AI. But just going back to this warehousing, I've not had any conversations with people about that, but I am interested. So is this something you're in favour of then, if the technology providers aren't talking to each other for whatever reason, and advisory firms are, is this something you're in favour of, advisory firms actually doing? And if so, what's the sort of cost to that then? Because if there's a skills gap as well, how easy is it to create this virtual warehouse where all this data or all these workflows are going to be?
That's a great question. It's a question I asked a number of CTOs that I was talking to about 12 months ago. Am I personally in favour of it? I think I'm agnostic, because at the end of the day, if I've got clients wanting to go down route A, B or C, we'll sit down with them and we'll discuss whether it is the right option. So agnostic as to whether it's the right thing to do, but I can absolutely see why firms are doing it. When you are saying to your board every year, we have a strategic objective of improving our business efficiency, getting on top of our risk, digitising the business. And then when the board say to you at the end of those 12 months, where are we? Well, we're not as far as we hope, because actually, we can't get this system to talk to that system. We can't get integration between them and them. We're not getting the data from here or there. So it's another year gone when we haven't met the objective.
Yeah.
So I said to somebody, so what are you going to do? We're going to have to rethink it. And literally the words that were said to me was, we're going to have to go around them. If they're not going to cooperate, we'll go around them and we'll do something different. So every conversation I'm having with senior people within advice and wealth businesses now is, we've either set up the warehouse and now we're on to phase 2, or we want to. So can we have a conversation about that?
Is this open to large and small firms?
Absolutely.
Because the industry profession, I always get corrected on the comments. It's a profession, James. It's a cottage industry anyway, because you've got very large consolidators, you've got national firms, you've got regional players, you've got boutiques as well. So is this open to all businesses, this warehousing?
Absolutely. In fact, every conversation I've had conversations with organisations that are maybe 5 advisors in there, but they're growing. So actually their foundations will be data driven. So they're literally setting themselves up to be a data-led businesses from inception. They're going to be data and digital all the way up to consolidators. So organisations who have purchased, got 20, 30 firms in the estate now. Every advice firm has maybe their own technology or their own way of working. And the message I hear from consolidators is they don't always want to impose a single way of working. It's just too difficult, and it may not be right. There may be a really good reason why firms in this cohort of consolidator estate work that way and those work another way. But those forward-thinking consolidators are thinking, well, we own the risk. Yeah. At the end of the day, the regulator's going to be looking at us saying, well, what on earth are you doing? So in that instance, consolidators are spinning up a warehouse and saying, well, we're going to pull out data from your systems. So we've got a global view as to what's going on, and we can then work with you to manage your businesses. We can give you some insight, some intelligence that maybe you can't get, but we can do it for you. But also throwing up data to the board saying, guys, this is what the totality of the business looks like. I'm not patching 30 spreadsheets together. We're actually pulling together data into a single space, and we can analyse it from all different angles.
So something like Power BI then. So I could literally go in there and look at the demographics of clients in different areas. I could look at their behaviours. Could I sort of look at in terms of, is it also plugged into your marketing systems? So when advisors do marketing, can you sort of get to see the behaviours in terms of how many people clicked on a link or went where on the website, or did they go over here? Can you start to draw that and go into that granular detail? So I'm sitting there and it's literally like a dashboard on a plane, and I can just go in there and start fiddling to really get the data. Is that where it could actually be?
It can be. So we'll step back a bit, because it's not always that easy, but In theory, yes. So if you think about data lake, data warehouses, this is the kind of the terminology that organizations use. If I can plug my systems, whatever systems I've got, my financial planning tools, my finance systems, my HR systems, my advisor T&C systems, my marketing systems, all of those are gathering data day in, day out. Whether you're putting it in, I'm putting it in, somebody else is putting it in. The data gets fed into a warehouse that's been set up to take on this data in a structured fashion. I then apply the analytics piece on top, and then you would typically have a set of data analysts who are very good at using these tools, or people.
So there's the skills gap there.
There's a skills requirement.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, some organisations will ask existing staff to upskill themselves. Others will go and seek that skill set and bring it in-house, but there are different ways of doing it. It depends upon the complexity.
Yep.
You can either use these tools to do some very simple reporting analytics, or to your point, start to analyse and assess things from a perspective that nobody had even thought about before. That requires somebody who's worked with data day in, day out, and thinks, if I add this, this and this, it gives me that answer. I bet you never thought of your business in that way, right? So, but again, it does require a skill set. And it's not just a question of people need to think carefully before they go into this space. You've got to think about the implications. The cost that I hear, it's not a costly thing to do, but then you have to manage it and maintain it. If you're going to do it, you've got to commit to it, right? So now you need someone who's going to manage this for you. But it goes back to the point, do you want to be a data-led business? Because if you do, my personal opinion on this is you should take control over your data. I'd go further to say, in the conversations I'm having with businesses I'm talking to, I think firms have 3 things that they should control. First is the advice, the proposition and the process, because that's now regulated activity. It's as per consumer duty. I think the regulator calls it out. The second is customer. It's the relationship, James, between your customers and me and mine and the advisor and theirs, etc. You manage that relationship. And then I said to a CTO, what's the third thing that you should control? And they said technology. And my challenge back was, how can you control the tech if you don't own it? You're licensing third-party software. And they were like, yeah. So you can influence, you can try and get them to do the right thing or get them to deliver on the requirements your business needs, but you can't force them to do it. So I said, let's go back to the question, what's the third thing? And I said, okay, let me take you there. It's data. Because the one thing that you own in those systems is the data. They're custodians of your data and they have an obligation to look after it, but it's yours and it belongs to your client. It belongs to your business or it belongs to your client. And once you've got control of that, you're on the journey. But senior executives have got to be comfortable that that's what they want to do, because once you start to say you want to be data-led, you start to think about your business model and the kind of organisation you're running, and it will have an implication.
So my challenge to that is, if you're a financial planning business and we're talking about data-led, and I agree, how do you go about changing behaviours or perceptions? Because financial planners also believe in the client experience, working with clients, getting to know the emotional side of financial planning. So the question really is behavioural change needed to enable firms to actually take advantage of data?
Absolutely. Without a shadow of a doubt. So when we talk about being a data-led business, there are components to that. One component is governance, strategy. First of all, you need to have a strategy for your data. What does it look like in your business? What objectives are you trying to achieve? The other is governance, right? So how am I going to look after this stuff? When it comes in, when it enters here, who looks after it? What are people's roles and responsibilities? And the third thing is around culture. And one of the best things I have heard, and there are a couple of organisations doing a fantastic job around this, they got this immediately, and their whole premise was around getting people to be data-led in their thinking. So there's a fantastic CTO out there. He's trying to instill the culture across all of the advice businesses in their estate, across all of their teams, setting up a data forum which had half a dozen people on there who were really committed to ensuring that the data was in a good state, that as an organisation they were really getting to grips with it, cascading that down into each practice. You have a data champion, having education forums, the ability to people to say, well, why are we doing that? Explaining why postcode input is important. Explaining why a salutation is important. Explaining why getting the children's names and ages is important. So they've been on a real journey of instilling that culture. But absolutely, it's like anything else. If you're going to change and morph your business from A to B, you've got to take the people with you, changing mindsets, and you've got to change the culture.
I think that's really hard to do, because in my experience, we're trying to get people to change their behaviours, to think of data as their friend. So you will thank yourself in the future by updating a client profile correctly, using the right codes or location, whatever. But it's not easy. And we try and think about incentives to get people to do that. And I'll share this, and it'll sound really bad, but it's not supposed to be. But when I'm doing my data analysis every week, we draw all the data points from the CRM system with regards to what's been inputted. And then because we are changing the way that we work and we've got to have a better relationship with data, we've started to do something called the Wheel of Misfortune. So we would look at a client record. So it's almost like the Wheel of Fortune. Was it Nicky Campbell on that? When it goes around, and then it picks out a client record. And then that record comes up on the screen, and then we go through it. And obviously this is on a live sort of Monday meeting that we have. And it's aimed to be a bit of fun. But the idea is to ingrain in people's mind that data is not going to go away, and we need people to be on board with it, because if you get the right data here, everything else will work. So it's a bit of fun, but you don't want to be called out and then have a data record which is like there's so many gaps. And we've seen probably a 20 to 30% increase in terms of quality, literally from day one.
Yeah.
So it's not there to penalise and be aggressive and angry. It's there to a bit of fun. And you go through it, and there's a bit of competition around it. But people look at it and go, I want my record to be clean. A, because you don't want to be called out. But actually, they then see the power of that data, what it can do further down the process. So that's one thing we've tried to do to change behaviours, as in a practical element. So to bring people along on that journey isn't easy. And you can do penalties, you can do you're not being paid your commission or whatever it may be. But that's one thing that's worked for us, to highlight a record, to go through it publicly with everybody. And actually then people say, well, actually, why do we fill that in? Why can't we do that? So you get them more engaged with it, which is great. Gives my ops manager a nightmare because he has to keep changing fields. But that's one way of trying to change the behaviour. And it's working for us. But
you know, your point about data quality is a really good one. Those organisations who have tried to instill an element of data culture within their businesses have had exactly the same experience. The moment you start telling people why it's important and what they need to do, and giving them a track to run on, and it's the ongoing coaching and training that you get. There was one firm that was suggesting to me that their data quality had gone up from sub 50% to 90% within 6 months. And we're talking about a financial planning business. It's like, wow, how did you do that? It was, we just absolutely committed to the change management element. So as an organisation, for us, change management is absolutely critical to anything, any piece of work we do with a client, because you've got to get people on board. Now, a couple of things. In my previous experience, how do you get people to change their behaviour? There's a carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
Okay. So the carrot is we'll incentivise you, we'll give you all the training that you need. You know, your life will be so much easier. It's the soft stuff, right? The stick is an interesting tool, and it's used when there is a criticality about the change, that if that change does not go through, there are severe implications for the organisation. So I'm going to use regulatory change as an example.
Yep.
When I have delivered regulatory change in the past, it has been in agreement with the senior execs that we sat down and said, how do we ensure that once D-Day arrives, D-Day +1, everybody is doing what they should be doing. And the answer came down to, well, we can either amend people's contracts to say, actually, we're just going to augment the role or the job responsibility. We're now adding something to your role. And that always requires HR. It's not an easy process, but there is always that. But if we don't get it right, if that team do not do that, and that in that particular way on that particular day, there is a consequence up here. So we're going to have to use a stick type approach on that. But again, there's a whole change management process explaining to people why contracts are being changed. That is one. The other one is around remuneration. It's actually, if you do that and you do it well, you get this remuneration. If you do that and you don't do it well, unfortunately, there's a penalty to the remuneration, i.e. you don't receive a bonus. So linking it to remuneration, that is a stick.
That's a stick.
But it really depends upon the severity of the outcome not being reached. If you are in breach of regulation because people have not done what they were asked to do, that is something that no organisation wants to go down. The thing about data, for me, is the irony that we have is that our regulator is a self-confessed data-led regulator. But they are not necessarily saying you have to be a data-led business. But for me, I would say, well, hang on a second. If the FCA is investing so heavily in their data capability, their data gathering, their data analytics, their data reporting capability, and they're looking at me to feed the beast that is their data machine, surely I should be looking at my organisation thinking, can we give them what it is that they're going to be asking for?
Yeah.
Now, there was the thematic review on retirement advice, which I believe took place a year or so ago. The outcome from the FCA's report, I believe, is they were quite shocked at how most advice firms that they'd asked to participate in that. Asked to participate by the FCA, I'm not sure you could ever say no. But anyway, I think you were asked to participate and the only answer was yes, I think, maybe, I don't know. Most of the firms I spoke to who were in that process said the level of information the regulator was asking for was unprecedented and the kind of information they were asking for was difficult to pull together.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
So we now have a data-led regulator. So the question I ask organisations is, are you set up to feed the beast that is the data gathering machine that is now the FCA? The fact that regulatory reporting is cited as one of the biggest operational challenges for any advice wealth management firm suggests no. So getting the data right, getting it set up, structured, managed, organised, will at least help you support your regulatory obligations. But as well as that, it means you can digitise your business. As well as that, it means you can start to think about AI. Because if you haven't got that foundation piece yet, the advice from everybody is please just don't go down the AI route. Because AI is a beast. It just feeds off data.
Yeah. So what goes in, if it's garbage, what spits out is also garbage.
The
it
adage,
won't work.
right? The adage, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
And the thing with AI is, and I was talking to the internal team about this podcast, and I said, look, we're going to be talking about AI. And the key message that the guy said to me was, look, you put data into a typical system, such as a back office system, the data just sits there. It only moves when you press a button. It goes from here to there. It's relatively static. AI, on the other hand, feeds off of data. Trying to undo bad data in an AI model is incredibly difficult because now it's learned something that it shouldn't have learned. Right?
So it's trying to unlearn.
It's trying to unlearn something that it's trying to unlearn something. So most of the advice and wealth management businesses I think you and I will be speaking to, I can't imagine many of them wanting to build their own AI models. They're going to be probably looking at their third-party technology vendors to provide those solutions to them. But the message here would be, if you're going to put Duff data into an AI tool, what are going to be the implications of that? So I think you and I are probably quite aligned on the message is that AI is a fantastic topic. It's really interesting. There's huge amounts of content out there about what it is and whether it's going to destroy the world or it's going to make us all more productive and more efficient and
What
happy.
do you think? What do you think? Because I'm quite... I love AI, and I've been in this rabbit hole, and I use it every day. But I do think we are running towards this open source technology. Different countries have got different priorities. I sometimes don't think we step back and just think about the consequences of what we're doing. And at some point, will it become sentient? Will it start to think and act human? And is this like the next generation of human evolution, or is this the end of us? So sometimes I look at it and think this is great, and I can see the business opportunity. I really can. But I also look at it and go, hang on a minute, this is going to have a fundamental impact on human society, certain jobs, etc. So do we need a different economic model to support people where they are going to lose their jobs? And I'm already seeing it in terms of, I talk to accountants and solicitors, and they're looking at it to do their payroll, and they're thinking, we don't need people, we can get it done by AI. That's going to have a human consequence. So I can see it from a business owner perspective, thinking, great. Then I look at it from a human perspective, and maybe my children, I think, ooh, it's a bit smelly.
Gosh, we're going to go down a rabbit hole if we talk about this.
Yeah, but what's your view? Do you think it's overall optimistic, positive, good for the economy, good for people, good for business?
Overall, I'm optimistic. And I spend a lot of my time reading about this stuff and watching podcasts. The two individuals who I've listened to who are quite pessimistic about this. So if anyone's heard of Yuval Noah Harari, he's a social historian. Absolutely love him. He's super pessimistic about where AI is going to go. Mo Gaudat, I think he was leading Google X, and I've heard him on a couple of podcasts, and he talks about what he was seeing, and he again can be quite dark.
He talks about the tipping point, doesn't he?
He does.
We're over here,
and he goes, oh. And then you have other individuals who are saying, actually, there's loads of productivity gains to be had. There's so much more that AI can do in healthcare and education. Yes. So if I were on the fence, I'd be slightly more on the positive, optimistic side. The consequences will be significant, and I don't have an answer to any of that, because if I were, I'd be probably leading a country somewhere. Yeah. But people are going to have to think about the impact it's going to have on individuals and populations and society. That's a big question. But if I go back to financial services, right, is AI a tool for good, or is it a tool that could harm us? And I'm going to look at the numbers. So let's go back to
always look at the numbers.
Always look at the numbers, right? So how many advisors do we have in the industry today? We're saying about 30,000, and I think the number is something in terms of 45% of advisors today are over the age of about 55 or something.
Yeah, and it's quite scary figures that they're going to retire in 5 years.
So let's be optimistic and give them a 10-year trajectory, right? So in 10 years, we're going to go from what we've got now, and we could be down to something like, 15,000 advisors. In 2023, 7% of the UK population received advice, with 30,000 advisors out there. So let's project forward when there's only half that number of advisors around, because the numbers are not coming in round the back. In fact, they were saying there was an actual decrease in the number of younger advisors coming in.
They can't get in.
They either don't want to or they can't. I'm not quite sure what the problem is there.
I've done a podcast. It's very difficult for new entrants to come in, because there's lots of self-employed opportunities, which I don't think as a profession they should be. If you want to be called a profession, you've got to professionalise how you attract the next generation.
And how you remunerate.
Yeah, you can't do a self-employed. That's not right. That doesn't show confidence in your own business, if I'm truly honest. So it is a struggle for new people to get in. And I know lots of firms are trying to do things collectively, but we have an ageing advisor population. Things need to change. So we do need to bring in the next generation, but we need to use tech. So sorry, I interjected, but I know it's a problem.
But you're absolutely right. So we're not getting the fresh talent in through the back door. advisors will be retiring, and so they should be. You know, they've done their stint, they've had great careers, they've looked after their clients, and they should sail off into the sunset and golf, or I don't know, do whatever the advisors do nowadays, right?
Golf.
Golf, probably. So the question remains, if only 7% of the UK population receive advice with 30,000 advisors, that number drops. How do you fill the gap? So this is where I'm optimistic about AI. Okay, so hybrid advice solutions. So if you look at the types of, I guess, Multiply, if you have a look at Conquest Planning, and you have a look at these solutions out there, hybrid advice is a type of AI, albeit it's a very limited type of AI. And there are different types of AI. You know, if you've got Netflix, if you've got Spotify, they're all using AI models in there because it's saying, well, if you like that, you might like this.
Yeah, okay.
So AI is not new.
But again, based on data.
It's absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
there we go again.
Always what it is you like. So AI is not new. It's been around for at least 40 years in some shape or form. What is new is the generative stuff. So when you go on Copilot and you're looking at some of this stuff and saying, write me a poem in Shakespearean style about my husband Mike, which is what I did, and it came up with a sonnet. It blew his mind because, oh my gosh, what is that? I said, welcome to the future. Yeah. It's generative.
Romance is not dead, eh?
Romance is not dead. Not in my house anyway, right? So in that case, I think we should be super optimistic about this. But if organisations are going to have longevity in our industry and people want to be there to serve the customer who needs advice for a mortgage, protection, investments, pension, whatever, tax planning, estate planning, etc., you're going to have to invest in the technology because the human capital is disappearing. They're all going to be on golf courses or on holiday and restaurants all over the world, right? So you replace it with technology. Great. So the technology is starting to emerge. You have hybrid advice providers, you've got client portals, you've got digital tools. Great. They don't talk together, but maybe I can do something. Maybe the industry will come together and it will stitch and knit these things together so I can have a really consolidated journey which customers will appreciate, they'll engage in. It's easy for them to use and it's efficient. The 3 E's, right, for a client experience. You know, is it engaging? Gosh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, I like that. Is it easy? Click a button, as you said with Amazon. And is it efficient? If I tap my name in once, I haven't got to do it again. But it all goes back to data. Because if you don't have the data in place, if it's not in a state that can be presented to a customer, you can't digitize. And if you can't digitize, well, then actually, what application does AI really have for you? Yeah. Because the AI will sit in the digitized tools, right? So it all goes back to data. And I guess a question that I have right now is to what extent are senior execs talking about their data strategy at a board level? Going back to the very beginning almost, because if the fuel that's going to power your business is in a unhealthy state, there's no governance around it, people don't understand it, people don't talk the language of data, it's not nurtured, it's not cared for, it's not grown. What exactly is the future of your business? Because the humans are disappearing. And in fact, I asked somebody a question the other day. If I were a product manufacturer now, an asset manager or a life office, and I'm looking at the distribution landscape, they've got the numbers. We've just explored the numbers. 30,000 advisors decreasing by, let's say, 50% in the next 10 years. Who's going to sell my product?
Fair point.
Who's going to sell my pensions? Now, I'd love to know what the answer is. So I guess my message to those execs would be, if you are talking to distribution partners, advisors, wealth managers, start talking about how you can stitch your systems together, how you can share data, how you can build a collective client experience. That if a client came to my business saying, Poppy, look, I'm struggling, I think I need a pension. would put you through a process and would say, actually, you don't really need me to complete your fact find. Actually, I mean, all you're going to do is give me your data and I'm going to type it in. So I'll tell you what, we'll give you a digital experience. I mean, when was the last time, James, you went to a travel agent and asked somebody to book you a holiday, a plane or a hotel?
Oh, it's a long time ago.
Well, there you go, right?
A long time ago, yeah.
So,
because you don't do it anymore. You just go online and
because
you do it.
The travel industry, whether it's travel, it's restaurants, it's hotels, even if you go to a supermarket, you've got to check out your own shopping now. Okay, so you know what those little tills in? I walk in with a trolley, I've got this little checkout there. So they have said, well, we're going to outsource all of that to the end customer. We're going to focus on what's really important. Where can we add value in the process? So I think I'd love to know if that conversation around data and client experience has hit the boardroom table. And the questions would be, do we have a data strategy? Do we understand what a data-led business looks like? Do we want to go there? And for some businesses, I'll say, you know what? No, I'm going to be retiring in 5 years' time. It'll be somebody else's problem. When I think about the organisations that are then left, if I look at maybe consolidators, going back to that piece because they are such a big part of the market now, the conversation I have splits. Consolidators who are saying we are kind of pretty much in it for the long term. We have a runway. We definitely want to be here. We want to grow the business. And growing for us means taking on more clients. But to take on more clients, we can't take on more human capital because it's not going to be there. So we're going to have to digitize. Therefore, we're going to start looking at our data now. Then you have the other camp of consolidator firms that are saying, well, every time we spend £1, somebody multiplies it by 8. And all of a sudden, it impacts the value of the business. So we're going to do the minimum that we need to do, and we'll see how we get along. Now, my personal opinion, and it is only personal, is that I think that's misguided, because ultimately the value in your business will be around whether it can grow and scale. And a business that isn't focused on data or its digital experience with customers, I'm not sure if that's going to be as attractive as the one over here.
Are we reaching the tipping point whereby if people or companies or leaders with the businesses, if they don't make the decision now, it might be too late?
This is such a fantastic question. This is such a great question because we're developing a thought leadership piece, which we're calling the big shift. Okay. And the big shift talks about there's an inflection point, there's a tipping point. And the shift is around the generational shift of client experience. So the baby boomers are now handing over their assets. I think that they say it's something like 5.5 trillion, James, that's moving, has started to move.
So is this the generational wealth transfer then? It goes from...
I've seen it referred to as the inheritance economy, which I think is a lovely phrase, actually. So as those assets move from generation baby boomer to my generation, I'm not saying I'm getting an inheritance, but there are people that will, and the generations below them. My parents' generation and their experience of receiving advice, accessing services was very different to mine. I'm going to be in the digital native camp, so actually I'm super happy going online, being digital first, and then if I need help, I can pick up the phone and speak to somebody. So you've got the attitude of the end client changing. Okay, so I don't really want to talk to you first, James. I'd rather go online. Can you give me a good first online experience? Yes or no? Nope, great. I'll go find somebody who is. If you can give me that good first line experience, as those assets are moving, the question I would then have for these firms is, are you going to be the organisation that loses a chunk of those assets? And there was a piece of research I was reading that suggested 50% of advice businesses are already starting to lose those assets, and some have lost up to 15% of their AUA already.
Wow.
Okay, because they don't have a relationship either with the spouse of the client who's inheriting or their children. So you've inherited £500,000, James. What are you going to do with it? You're going to keep it where it is, or you're going to maybe reduce your debt, your mortgage, pay off a couple of loans, buy cars for your kids, buy a flat for one of your children, pay for a wedding, go on holiday. Oh, what have I got left? What am I going to do with that now? Well, I don't know who Fred was. Nothing to do with me. Right, so I'll go somewhere else. So are you going to be the firm that loses it or captures it? And if you don't have that digital first experience, am I going to go to you? My perspective on it would be you're probably going to lose it if you don't have any digital online presence.
There's no loyalty there, though, is there?
Well,
because
there isn't.
Because that's gone.
But you didn't build loyalty with me.
I was going to say, yeah.
You built it with my parents.
That's right. So if they're no longer there and it's been inheritance has gone down the line, if there's no loyalty, I don't know anybody, then I'm just going to go where I can get the best experience first, or where somebody else recommends.
And what's your requirement for a service provider who could talk to you about pensions, investments, or whatever?
Well, the first thing I'll be doing is looking online to assess what the brand perception, what they look like, how easy it is to get the questions that or the answers I'm looking to get from the questions that I've got. And if that experience is there, you're building up that relationship, you're enticing me in, and it's easy, because we are now living in a digital world, so everything is 2 clicks. If you make it overcomplicated, like you said it before, if I have to fill things in 4 times, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go elsewhere. So I am now in the digital age, and it's going to, even for my kids, it's even more so anyway. And I still like that human interaction, but I'll be looking online first. And
your first touch point is going to be a website.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Right? And I hate to say it, but when I look at the websites of advice businesses, they are all very much of a similar flavour. There is, yes, the branding is different.
Yeah, about us.
And you might have
yeah.
And you might have a different stock image.
Yeah.
Right? But there'll be an IHT section, estates, wills, pensions, who we are, what we do, etc. I wouldn't call that a really great retail experience. Okay? I just wouldn't.
What does it look like in your mind then? Because they're all the same. Most websites say the same thing.
I think to stand out nowadays, my view would be we need to look at the retail businesses who have really stood out and how they've designed that first client experience. So my view and our view at Accelerator Labs is that we don't think that, we believe that advice wealth management businesses are not going to be competing with each other necessarily. They're going to be competing with tech companies or retail brands, because research is already showing that if given the choice, if I had to buy a pension or investment, I'd rather go to one of those organisations where it is easy, it's engaging, and it's super efficient. I've already got an established relationship with that organisation, so they know me and I know them, and I can work through their service offering. I'd rather go there, actually, than dealing with an advisor in Wilmslow somewhere, or in Nottingham, or in, a borough of Glasgow. I don't know who you are. There's no brand presence. I don't get it. I think it will be challenging, but it's not impossible. Advice firms should be looking at all of the touch points that a client has for their business. So one of the things we're working on at the moment is we're mapping out all of the touch points a customer has going into an advice business, everything from Google. So the first time I see you, what should that experience look like? To the very end, I actually want to exit. I want to leave the relationship. What does that experience look like? Because that's just as important as you onboarding or getting somebody through the door, is how you actually terminate or end the relationship in our perspective. And also looking at the touch points. So we as a business need to talk to you. So we're now reaching out. So what do those digital experiences look like? So it's something we're working through, and we're going to be sharing with organisations next year once we've got that. But the digital experience is going to be so important, and I just wonder whether people are talking about it at a senior level. In fact, I asked somebody 2 weeks ago, are you hearing this in boardroom conversations that you're privy to? And the answer was no. I said, are you hearing people talking about client experience anywhere? And the answer was no.
So what are they talking about then?
Technology. What we are talking about right now is the technology, and that it doesn't work. So one of the things we're trying to do with Accelerator Labs is move the conversation on, because you can't fix the technology because you don't own it. But you can focus on what you can control, right? So you can focus on your client experience and you can focus on your data. So let's start talking about those things. Because if as an organisation I have a really clear view about the experience I want my customers to get, and I have a blueprint, I have a conversation now I can have with my technology vendors. If you want to pitch for my business, you need to be able to meet these requirements. If you can't, that's great. Don't worry about it. We'll have to reconsider the relationship and maybe we go over here. And I think, I hope I don't speak out of turn here, but I think it would be great to see technology vendors take a lead on this, but I'm not seeing it right now. I think maybe distribution is going to have to drive the customer experience conversation, i.e. we want more and more of the technology that you're releasing to us to be client-facing. Now, there are two ways of doing it, and the worst-case examples I've seen, James, is where technology vendors have taken a back-office system, taken the screens, put a pleasant-looking face on it, and pointed it at a client and saying, oh, this is your version. So your client-facing technology is essentially the back-office version with a pretty screen, right?
Yeah.
How much thought and effort has gone in to the client experience design? Very little.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to explicitly call out Money Alive as an organisation, because the work that they are doing to help customers understand what they are engaging with and what the product means to them is phenomenal.
Is that Andy Kirby?
It is.
Big shout to Andy Kirby.
Big shout to Andy Kirby. I've spoken to his team. I think what they are doing is remarkable. So one of the things I get frustrated about with technology is we digitize paper. Right, so you've been in this industry as long as I have, because I'm sat here looking at you and thinking, yeah, we're probably not too dissimilar in age, right?
Early 30s, what are you talking about?
He's not. So if I take the suitability letter as an example, right? When I joined the industry, I remember being in the office and the advisor saying, how long is that suitability letter? I said, oh, it's about 20 pages. Make it 30 because we need to demonstrate that there's a bit of weight behind this, because we're getting, there's a hefty commission piece to this. Oh, okay. So we'll add in a few more. That definitely feels like that's worthy of that commission. So we blew up the suitability report to justify the fees that we were taking. Now, whether that was true of everybody, I don't know. But in the organisations I've worked in, that certainly was the case. And then we automated it. We automated 30 pages of a report and said we're going to make a 30-page digital report. Now I ask you, I ask you, how often have you read your pension statement? How often have you read any 30-page report regarding your finances?
Again, I will be direct with you. I haven't, and I don't. I'll just look at a number.
There you go. Thank you very much for it.
I just, and I think I know you're onto something here, because I just don't have time. And it's not, we live in a bite-sized sort of snippet world anyway. I need to know what I need to know. And if I need to know other things, I need to be able to access it. But if you are literally just digitizing a 30-page pension statement and giving me that, I still get pension statements now in the post as well. What a waste.
That's a different podcast for another day, so we can talk about that afterwards. But in terms of the experience, so you have digitized a poor paper process and now turned it into a 30-page digital experience. And I might get to page 1, page 2, bash, I'm done. I'm not going to read it. But there's a tension here. And I can see why advice firms are challenged with this, because there is a whole bunch of regulatory and compliance requirements you have to meet. And I get it. So you have to make that information available to the client. But this is why I love what Money Alive are doing. They're digitizing the process, right? They're saying, actually, we're going to turn it into a video and turn it into a presentation. So the challenge I put to a technology vendor about a month ago was, as opposed to sending me a digital document, why don't you turn it into a podcast, a video, an interactive piece of, I know, online content that I could watch. I often take, I've got a dog, have to take her out every single day. I could listen to my report whilst I'm walking. And the pet, what a great idea. Isn't that a great idea? How often everybody podcasts. So this is what I'm talking about. We need to stop thinking about content being a regulatory requirement and, again, money alive, and switch our thinking and thinking, how do we make people really engage with it? Because I would want you to know what it is you're buying. I think it's important. So let's put the effort in. So if I were to throw out a challenge to the technology vendors out there, if you're building client-facing tech, to what extent are you really investing in that experience? And maybe you can get some of them on here, James, and saying, look, what does it mean to you? And are there complications with it? That's one of the things I would be saying to advice and wealth management firms. Understand your blueprint for client experience. Try and build what you can with what you've got. And where you can't, challenge your vendors for it.
That's really good advice. That's really good advice.
And we're happy to be part of that conversation. I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's not easy. It really isn't easy when the tech doesn't fit together. It's not easy when the tech is not engaging for a customer. But we're seeing pockets of, I think, great stuff emerge, green shoots. I think it's a really interesting time. But would I want to be the exec in an advice and a wealth management business today? Because if I look at my business model, if it were me, I'd be thinking, how am I going to transition my business from what it is now, which is essentially human-led, so lots of human capital in there, with lots of technology, don't get me wrong, to a state where I have human capital, I have data as an asset, I have digital capability, and I've got AI tooling in there. It's a fundamentally different business to what I have now. And it requires a skill set shift, not just at the bottom level with maybe administrators, power planners, ops people, IT. I would say from the top down, the board are going to have to speak the language of data. They're going to have to think, well, okay, we will make decisions based upon the data that we've got. Somebody on the board's going to have to be talking about AI comprehensively, intelligently, giving us advice and telling us where we go. HR are going to have to be looking at the talent pool and the skills that we have in our business, thinking, do we have the right skill set to build an advice business of the future? And if we can't get it externally, how do we upskill people today? And there will be people that are saying, gosh, I can't do this. It's not what I signed up for. How do you deal with that? So the brave organisations and the guys who have a clear vision, who are in it for the long term, they're already on the journey. There's a cohort in the middle. I'd love to know if they're thinking about it. And if they need support on that journey, always here to have a conversation. And as I said, there'll be a cohort of businesses, and James rightly, it's just not going to be their issue because they'll be sailing off into the sunset.
Which is fine. That's going to happen. That's the natural attrition.
But it's a transformation.
It is.
And this is where we were talking about the big shift. You've got that demographic shift of people. You've got the assets moving. Are you going to win or lose? You've got the advisor numbers dropping. You've got the skill shift in people as business models transform. You've got AI now. It increases by 10x per annum, they're saying. You have all of these factors
but you've also
swirling around.
You've also got the governance of the business now, the profitability now. You've got shareholder pressure now. So even if you're running a business and you're thinking about the future, you've still got pressures of now. So if I was in that sort of middle camp and I'm thinking, I'm in it for the long term, but I'm struggling now to see, because this is taking me into areas that I don't really understand, because data is complex, and as you say, it's not just technology, and that seems to be not working particularly well anyway. Your proposition will help people like that understand and roadmap that journey. Is that right? Is that where you can support these businesses who are thinking, I need some help with this?
Absolutely right. In fact, I was talking to a client the other day. They were building a business case for their board just to try and articulate why the leadership team needed to invest in what they're doing. And our job really was to help them shape their thinking, shape the paper, shape the argument. So they could, it's really about empowering them to have the internal conversation. So either we can sit down and have the conversation, or we empower the teams to have that conversation. But for us right now is with those forward-looking firms, if they're on that journey and they are looking for support, they are looking for thought leadership, they are looking for capability, they are looking for expertise, always happy to have that conversation. Would love to have that conversation. But if you're on that middle chunk and you're thinking, gosh, where do we start? Again, we absolutely revel in having that conversation, because we have to be super mindful about getting people to think about what their future looks like. And then the question for us often is, if you don't do this, what does that mean to your business? Where will that leave you? Now, for some people, it could be, well, if that's where it leaves me, I'm okay with that. And that's an absolutely perfectly reasonable response to have. It's your business at the end of the day. If your shareholders are happy with that, your investors are happy with that, absolutely fine. But then there are those who are thinking, gosh, that's not the space we want to be in. We'd like to be in that camp over there with those organisations who have got their head around what all of this means, the impact it has on our business, and what transformation is going to look like. And painting the picture of transformation is often the hardest, because it's giving somebody a vision of what their future state is going to look like. We fundamentally believe it's going to be different.
It sounds hugely exciting as well. It sounds like a huge opportunity.
I always think, look, with challenge comes opportunity. I'm always optimistic by nature. I'm always glasses half full. So I think the advice businesses who get this right are absolutely set up to capitalise on the opportunity. And the opportunity is of not just serving 7% of the UK population, doubling, tripling, quadrupling that. Why not go for 50%? I know some people who talk about their mission in their business is to have as many people owning a financial plan in the UK as is possible. When I doubt we're ever going to get to 100% because it's just not feasible. It's just not relevant to absolutely maybe everybody.
But even 20%.
Dialing it up from 7.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Let's double it. Let's triple it. Let's quadruple it. The organisations who start the transformation now will be set up. I think we're looking at a 10-year window before the change, the impact of the societal change that I was just talking about there, the shift factors, really start to take hold. Now, a decade is a long time when you're dealing in 2-3 year periods of, right, okay, as a leadership team, we've got a 3-year target to do X, and then it's the next leadership team's issue, right? So whose problem is it?
That's a good question.
So is it the leadership team's problem now? Thinking, well, actually, technically, I'm going to be judged on my 3-year performance, but we're looking at 7 years away. That'll be their issue. But if we don't start the work now to mobilise, to think about what that future vision looks like.
But surely, if you care about your business, if you care about what you provide, financial planning, helping people to achieve their goals, and you want your business to continue, then now is the time to act. That will be my view, because if I was looking to work for a business, yes, I know there are cycles, but you're not going to be attracting the next generation. But if you do transition your business where you are looking at data, you're looking at client experience, you're increasing your market share because you're tapping into that inheritance wealth transfer, whatever that term was. I don't think I got it right. But
the inheritance economy. I thought it was a
lovely
lovely phrase.
It's much better than mine. But if you're tapping into that, you are building a successful and profitable business, which is almost future-proof. And I think that's exciting. But I think the time is to act now, to start building those plans, to get onto this journey, because things are changing. But be part of that change. That will be my view.
And this is why I think podcasts like this are really important. And there are, I know there are other forums where conversations are happening. We're certainly going to be accelerating our conversations in this space next year. We're 3 weeks old today. So
Really?
We've only just started, yeah. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because in the 25 years I've been in this industry, the advice space has gone through an awful lot, as has financial services generally, okay? But it's often driven by a regulatory seismic event. So the retail distribution review was seismic. What did we have after that? MiFID was seismic, notably for the asset management community. But again, advisors felt it most recently now with cost and charges disclosure still being a massive headache for advice businesses because asset managers disclose costs and charges differently. And I was part of the MiFID program. It's a different conversation as to why we are where we are, but it was complicated, that piece of work. Then we've had consumer duty. Now, consumer duty is an interesting one because it's a mind shift change, right? We're having to think about customer first, which is ironic that I think we've always had customer at heart, albeit there have been some poor practices. I'm not going to say it's a perfect industry. So as an industry, we get through the regulatory change because we have to. But this isn't regulatory. This is just a matter of survival now. There's no regulator pushing you to stay in business. You know, if you don't morph into a data-led business, focus on customer engagement and enable AI within your business, I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. That's not the regulator's remit. They're just going to say, if you're operating, you operate within the rules of that we set for you as an industry. So for us, our perception here is that businesses are going to have to impose this change on themselves. Now,
which is sometimes harder to do.
Who has the appetite for that?
Yeah.
When disruption is forced upon you, you're like, well, hang on, mea culpa, we're going to have to do it. But now you've got the leadership team saying we're going to start reinventing our business, because if we don't reinvent it, we will lose relevance. And if we lose relevance, you lose customers. Well, you've just lost the business. So if we don't break our business and rebuild it into a mold that meets with customer expectations, it's retail, it's digital, it's online. You've given me a great experience. Thank you very much. And I'll pick up the phone and talk to you when I need to talk to you. I don't want you coming and sitting in my living room.
Yeah.
I don't want you sitting in my kitchen table completing a fact find. Thank you very much. That's not the experience that I want. Now, if you can get there, that's great. But who's going to impose that on themselves? The brave. Those who have a future in mind and those who are committed to the industry.
So take the opportunity now then.
The message
Otherwise,
is,
you're going to become like the blockbusters.
This is not an overnight transformation. And, regulatory change is different because you always have a deadline, right? There is no deadline here other than the ones we think there are. So if we think about advisor numbers dropping in 10 years, is that the deadline? Is AI increasing by 10x PA? Gosh, is that the deadline? Generational shift, well, that's a 30-year window. We're about halfway through it now. Do we want to change in the next 10 years so we catch some of those assets? When are you going to shift? There isn't one driver. It's just lots of things hitting you at once. And someone's going to have to make a judgment and think, crikey, what's our response to those shifts? What's our response to what is happening? What is our response to whether we want to be around in any way, shape or form in the next 10 years? What is the response?
Well, it's going to get people thinking, Poppy. Do you know what? This podcast today, firstly, thank you very much, because it's refreshed me again, because I needed this conversation. I really did. Because as a business owner, you're just busy doing 100 things. You really are. And I think you need to set out your vision, what your business should be certainly I've done it over the next couple of years. And I know that data is paramount in that. And also the client experience, to marriage the two together, the digital experience, the human element, never forget that. That's so important. But this isn't going away. This is happening now, and it's not just in my business, it's in most businesses now. So my view as a business owner is, if you don't get on board with these things, you'll miss the opportunity. As you say, there are multiple different timelines, but you have now to make that decision to say, what do I want my business to look like? Because it is changing, and AI is going to be a bigger, dramatic change than the internet, than they even say the Gettysburg Press. It's absolutely fundamental. So get on board with it now. Is there anything that you wanted to cover off before I ask you my final question? Any sort of leaving thoughts to the people that be watching this?
Okay, I'm going to end on two funny anecdotes, right? It's from a former COO who ran a very big life insurance business, and he was giving me the story literally 3 days ago. He was in his office and the phone rang, and it was a client, and it was an irate customer saying they'd like to make a complaint. Okay, so I do apologise. What's gone on? I've received a letter from your company today, right? It's addressed to Mr. Couch Potato, right? So
Right.
COO goes, I do apologise. I have no idea how that happened. I will look into it. So having to pacify the customer, etc., and calm things down, marched into the obviously his Oppo's office, saying what on earth is going on, found the individual who was looking after that customer. They'd typed in Mr. Couch Potato into the CRM. So when they did an automated letter run, it was using that salutation, Couch Potato, right?
That's
now,
brilliant.
in that instance, the data that was in the system had caused an issue for the organisation. So, I suppose my final parting comment on this is, who do you want to be? What kind of, do you want to be the organisation that has lots of great quality data, you understand it, you value it, it's an asset to your business, like your customers are, like your proposition is, as your data is, you've got those three things fully under control. You've got a leadership team, a C-suite, who are all over these three things. They understand the value all three, that the three work in tandem together. And they're committed to that future. One where you're a data-led business, the client experience is at the forefront of what everybody is doing, and when you're ready, you can enable your business with some AI capability, but only when the timing is right, and if you have the use cases for it, and if the data is right. Or you want to be the organisation over here that has no control over its data. People don't value it. It's a nuisance for everybody in the business. And when you try and digitise, you end up issuing a letter to Mr. Couch Potato.
Mm-hmm.
It's a no-brainer question.
I'm just laughing at Couch Potato.
It is. And listen, I have spoken to countless operations directors. One springs to mind in particular. I may be having a meeting with him in the next couple of weeks where they won't be digitising their client experience, i.e. launching a client portal, simply because they don't know what's in their database. They don't have any comfort that all of the customer data is as accurate as it should be.
So there's a fear there.
That there aren't any Mr. Couch Potatoes in there. And not even it's maybe we've got the name wrong. Yeah. Maybe there is the address.
Inaccurate data.
It's inaccurate, right? And nobody wants to be there. You could get 90% of it could be absolutely right, or the 95% of it could be right, but for the 5% where it's wrong, that's going to hit you.
I have to say on that, it's probably one of the biggest turn-offs, because there is lots of automation out there. But if they get your name wrong, or in my instance, my company name wrong, where they call me like the BBC, like it's BWD, it's an automatic turn-off. You never go back to them.
Literally.
So get your data right.
We get people spell Achilles wrong all the time. It's normally Achilles. It's like, no, it's like Achilles' heel. Have you not seen the film Troy?
But you remember it though.
But you remember it thinking, gosh, you couldn't even bother to get that right.
Yeah.
So this is why, data is the new oil. I know it's a cliche, but it really is. I genuinely think that senior leaders should have it on their boardroom table conversation there right at the top. Helps you to manage risk, helps you to manage your client experience, helps you to grow your business. And it sets you up for a business of the future, really. So that's our abiding message.
So get in touch.
Get in touch with Accelerator Labs. We're here for you. We'd love to talk to you. And I think the reality is right now where we are, myself and the team, they love data. I mean, these guys are knee-deep in it. They're knee-deep in digital and data. And I was at we had a strategy offsite yesterday, and they're all over it. Yeah. And they've got their AI team, and they're always talking about what we're doing and this. And I think it's fascinating. I'll be learning a lot from them. But I think right now, even if it's just talking to senior leaders about saying, can we just come in and let's have a briefing session. Explain to us where you are on your journey, what you think you'd like to do, and we'll just have a conversation with you, even if we can just share what we know, what we've learned along our journey. But every day's a school day.
As you said at the start.
Every day's a school day, so we're learning all the time, and we're happy to share it. But thank you.
Thank you, Poppy. One final question before you go.
Go on.
It's my magic wand question.
Oh, gosh.
Here we go. So I'm going to give you a magic wand, and this magic wand will give you one wish. Just one wish. And you can't wish for 5 other wishes, by the way. What would you wish for?
In terms of
anything?
Oh. What would I wish for? You know, this sounds crazy, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would wish for people to find joy, whether every day, just find a moment in your day where something is joyful. Because quite often, it's that, you know, when you're busy, you think, gosh, that was a tough day. But even in the toughness of that day, even in the craziness of that day, there will be a moment of joy, and hang on to it. I'm going to leave you with, and I'll tell you why I think that's important. When I was 40, my 2 best pals, love them, like my brothers, bought me a gift. And the gift was a course. It was a course about, you know, improving yourself and managing your mindset, etc. And there was one statistic that they gave. If you live to 80, okay, if you live to 80, that's about 30,000 days of life. Slightly more, I think it was just over 30,000. I'm just going to say it was just over 30,000, right? I was 40 on that course, right? So already I'd done 15,000 days, and I only had 50. So I've only got 15,000 days left if I live to 80. I am, in about 5 weeks' time, going to be 49, right? So I've lost another chunk. So every day, I'm not kidding you, it doesn't matter where I am, I don't care if it's pouring with rain, the weather's terrible, the weather's great, I'm having a rough day, I'm just going to find a moment of joy in it, because, gosh, I just wouldn't want to be on day 30,000 if I make it, thinking, oh, I didn't take the best out of every single day. So once it's gone, it's gone. It's a scary number. Don't think too hard about it. I try not to.
Being the same age, I'm just working that out. Yeah,
I know. Yeah. You're gonna get the calculator out, thinking, what is that number? Where am I? It shot me to the core. It's one of those stats, right? I'm thinking, gosh. But the irony is, 30,000 sounds like a lot, doesn't it? It's 80. It's not 80 in itself is not a big number. 30,000 is a huge number. But in this occasion, when they flipped it, I had 30,000 days, and I'd already done 50% of that, 15,000. I thought, crikey. And
scary.
Literally overnight, my entire attitude to me, my life, what I'm responsible for, what I can be responsible for, changed. It literally just flicked a switch in my head. So, bit of joy every single day. It's fantastic.
What a wonderful way to end the podcast. Poppy Achilles, thank you so much for joining me today. I've learned a lot, and I needed this as well. So what we will do is we'll put various different links within the publication as well to your website, etc. And if anyone is thinking about their next steps, get in touch. She knows what she's talking about.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.